Hello and welcome to this video. Today we want to think about how we can improve our reading comprehension. We want to improve our understanding of what we're reading. Let's first talk about metacognition. Metacognition is just a way of saying thinking about thinking. It's understanding our thought processes and what our minds are doing. If we can understand the things our minds are doing and practice helpful skills, we will be able to improve our reading ability. The strategy we're going to look at today is making connections. By making connections with what we're reading and what we already know, we are much more likely to understand what we are reading. Our brains are a bit like a web. When we come across a new piece of information, our brains need to connect it with things we already know. The more connections our brains can make, the more likely we are to learn it. Knowing this can be helpful when we are reading. If we are able to make connections with what we are reading to things we know, we are much more likely to understand what the text is saying. There are three main ways that we can make connections with the text. There is text to self, how our own experiences are similar or relatable to the ones that are happening in the text. There is text to text, how the things in the text are similar to things in other texts that we have come across in the past, like other books or movies. And there is text to world, how things in the text relate to things in the world around us. These could be things close to us or far from us. Let's read a short passage from C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. They were sent to the house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles from the nearest railway station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife, and he lived in a very large house with a housekeeper named Mrs. Macready and 3 servants. Their names were Ivy, Margaret, and Betty, but they do not come up in this story much. He himself was a very old man with shaggy white hair which grew over most of his face as well as on his head, and they liked him almost at once. But on the first evening when he came out to meet them at the front door, he was so odd-looking that Lucy, who was the youngest, was a little afraid of him, and Edmund, who was the next youngest, wanted to laugh and had to keep on pretending he was blowing his nose to hide it. Now, let me make some connections. So let's think about text to self. The children were sent away to the country. Sometimes I go on holiday to the country. While I'm in the country, it often feels like I'm far away from people and far from home. Edmund couldn't help laughing at the professor's appearance. There have been a number of occasions where I've had to excuse myself because I couldn't help laughing at something that I shouldn't have been laughing at. I'm sure you probably have something similar. Now let's think about text to text. Are there any other books or movies that I have read or seen which are similar to some of the events here? Well, I know that this is set in England, and I've read several books that are also set in England. Some of them are like the Harry Potter books. And text to world. Are there any ways that I can relate this text to the world around me? Maybe history or things that are currently going on now? This passage talks about events during World War II. I know that it was a hard time for people living at this point in time all over the world. I know that London was bombed by planes and it was a scary time for people who lived there. As we can see, by making a few connections even from this short passage, we can understand so much about what is happening in the book. We understand where it is set, when in history it is set, and even how the characters might be feeling. By making connections as we read, we are better able to understand what the text is saying to us. We are able to read on a deeper level.